From the worst Mexican prison to the almost nude women's prison, let's delve into the 10 most dangerous women's prisons in the world. Number 1. Padarai Prison, Estonia. Padarai Prison, located in Tallinn, Estonia, is a former fortress that later became a high-security prison. It housed inmates of both sexes until its official closure in 2002. However, the prison's sinister history and poor conditions have earned it a place on our list. The dark, damp, and overcrowded cells were known for being breeding grounds for diseases and infestations, making prisoners vulnerable to illnesses. Padarai prisoners were subjected to inhumane treatment by prison guards who were notorious for their brutality. Physical and psychological abuse was common, causing many inmates to suffer lasting trauma. Additionally, medical care was almost non-existent, leading to the deaths of numerous prisoners due to untreated illnesses or injuries. Padarai Prison also witnessed several high-profile human rights violations. During its time as a Soviet prison, it was the scene of numerous executions, tortures, and forced labor. In the post-Soviet era, the prison continued to operate in a state of decay, with its crumbling infrastructure and terrible living conditions causing further suffering for inmates. Women imprisoned in Padarai faced additional challenges such as sexual abuse and harassment from guards and male inmates. The lack of separation between male and female prisoners exacerbated the situation, leaving female inmates vulnerable to violence and exploitation. Despite its closure, Padarai Prison remains a dark symbol of human rights abuses. Today, the prison is a museum and memorial site, showcasing its harrowing past and the suffering of those incarcerated. The stories of the women who faced the horrors of Padarai Prison serve as a reminder of the need for reform and human rights protection in the global prison system. Before continuing, press the subscription button so you don't miss any new videos. Number 2. Bangkok Hilton, Thailand. Bangkok Hilton, officially known as Bangkwang Central Prison, is a high-security prison in Thailand that houses inmates of both sexes. Despite its nickname, which evokes images of a luxurious hotel, the reality of this prison is far from glamorous. Bangkok Hilton is infamous for its appalling conditions, harsh treatment of inmates, and strict disciplinary measures, making it one of the most dangerous and feared prisons in the world. The living conditions in Bangkok Hilton are deplorable, with overcrowding being a major issue. Prisoners are crammed into small, filthy cells, and many are forced to sleep on the floor due to a lack of beds. The cells are infested with insects and rodents, and the sanitary facilities are woefully inadequate, leading to widespread health problems and the spread of diseases among inmates. Female prisoners at Bangkok Hilton face several problems, including sexual abuse and exploitation. The lack of proper separation between male and female inmates exacerbates the issue, as women are targeted by both inmates and guards. They also endure invasive searches and degrading treatment that affects their mental health. Medical care at Bangkok Hilton is deficient, and sick or injured inmates are often denied adequate treatment, leading to untreated illnesses and severe complications. Disciplinary measures, such as prolonged isolation, negatively impact the mental health of inmates. The food provided is insufficient and of poor quality, causing malnutrition. Corruption within the prison system limits access to food and medicine to those who can afford to pay bribes. The reputation of Bangkok Hilton as one of the world's most dangerous women's prisons is well deserved. The terrible conditions and mistreatment make it a living hell for inmates. Number 3. Women's Prison of Banga, Egypt. The Women's Prison of Banga, located in the city of Banga, Egypt, is a notorious institution known for its appalling conditions, human rights violations, and the atrocious treatment its inmates receive. The prison has gained notoriety for its harsh living conditions and the disturbing experiences faced by the women incarcerated there, earning it a place among the most dangerous women's prisons in the world. The living conditions in the Women's Prison of Banga are deplorable, with overcrowding being one of the main issues. Inmates are forced to share small, squalid cells with inadequate ventilation and sanitary facilities. The lack of proper hygiene contributes to the spread of diseases and infestations, making the prison environment hazardous to the health of the women held there. In addition to the poor living conditions, inmates at the Women's Prison of Banga are subject to various forms of abuse and mistreatment. Physical and psychological abuse by prison guards is common, with inmates often enduring beatings, humiliation, and other forms of cruel treatment. Many women in the women's prison of Bangkok have reported sexual assaults and harassment by guards and other inmates. Medical care in the prison is inadequate, leading to untreated illnesses and injuries. The lack of proper medical attention endangers the physical and mental health of inmates, especially pregnant women and those with chronic illnesses. The prison administration imposes severe punishments such as isolation and physical beatings, even for minor infractions. Corruption is rampant, with food and medication only accessible through bribes. The women's prison of Bangkok highlights the inhumane conditions faced by inmates. Number 4. Santa Martha, Acatitla, Mexico. Santa Martha, Acatitla, located in Mexico City, Mexico, is a high-security women's prison notorious for its poor conditions, violence, and corruption. The institution has a long history of human rights abuses and mistreatment of inmates, earning it a place among the most dangerous women's prisons in the world. The harrowing experiences of the women confined within its walls serve as a stark reminder of the urgent need for prison reform and human rights protection. Overcrowding in Santa Martha, Acatitla is a serious problem. The unsanitary conditions and lack of ventilation contribute to the spread of diseases. Additionally, the lack of access to clean water and nutritious food leaves inmates vulnerable to malnutrition and illness. Violence is common, with physical and psychological abuse from guards and other inmates. Female inmates also suffer from sexual assaults and harassment, creating an atmosphere of fear. The prison administration's lack of action has empowered the abusers. Medical care is inadequate, endangering the physical and mental health of inmates, especially pregnant women and those with chronic illnesses. Corruption in the prison system forces inmates to pay bribes for food, medication, and hygiene products. These terrible living conditions and corruption erode trust in the prison administration. Disciplinary measures such as isolation and physical punishment negatively affect inmates' mental health, leading to feelings of despair, depression, and anxiety. Santa Martha, Acatitla showcases the deplorable conditions and abuses faced by female inmates, highlighting the need for prison reform and human rights protection. Number 5. El Buen Pastor, Colombia. El Buen Pastor, located in Bogotá, Colombia, is the largest women's prison in the country and has gained a notorious reputation for its inhumane living conditions, violence, and corruption. The harsh environment of the institution places it among the most dangerous prisons in the world. The struggles faced by the women incarcerated in El Buen Pastor underscore the urgent need for prison reform and human rights protection. Overcrowding is a critical issue in El Buen Pastor, as the prison houses almost twice its intended capacity. Inmates are forced to live in overcrowded and miserable conditions, with insufficient ventilation and sanitary facilities. The lack of hygiene contributes to the spread of diseases and infestations, endangering the health of the inmates. Violence is a constant problem in the prison, with inmates suffering physical and psychological abuse from guards and fellow prisoners. Female inmates endure sexual assaults and harassment, resulting in lasting trauma and constant fear. The lack of action by the prison administration perpetuates the cycle of violence and abuse. Medical care at El Buen Pastor is deficient, endangering the physical and mental health of inmates. Pregnant women and those with chronic illnesses are particularly vulnerable. Corruption forces inmates to pay bribes for food, medicine, and hygiene products. This culture of corruption worsens living conditions and undermines trust in the prison administration. Harsh disciplinary measures such as isolation and physical punishment negatively impact mental health. Feelings of despair, depression, and anxiety are common, contributing to a general sense of hopelessness. El Buen Pastor illustrates the terrible conditions and abuses faced by inmates. Number 6. Ravensbrook Concentration Camp, Germany. Ravensbrook Concentration Camp, located in northern Germany, was the largest women's concentration camp during World War II, operated by the Nazis between 1939 and 1945. Although not a contemporary prison, the atrocities committed within its walls justify its inclusion on this list of the most dangerous women's prisons. The horrifying experiences of the women held at Ravensbrook serve as a chilling reminder of human cruelty and the importance of preventing such events from happening again. Living conditions were appalling, with overcrowding, filth, and misery. Inmates were housed in unsanitary barracks with inadequate ventilation, contributing to the spread of diseases. Malnutrition was common due to meager food rations, weakening prisoners and making them more susceptible to illnesses. At Ravensbrook, prisoners suffered physical and psychological abuse. They were beaten, tortured, and humiliated by Nazi guards. Women were victims of sexual assaults and forced prostitution. They were also subjected to horrific medical experiments, including sterilizations and invasive surgeries without anesthesia. Medical care was inadequate, and many sick or injured prisoners went untreated. The camp hospital, known as the Revier, was a place of death. Prisoners worked under brutal conditions, producing goods for the Nazi war effort. Exhaustion, malnutrition, and diseases were rampant. Prisoners unable to work were executed or sent to extermination camps. Ravensbrook stands as a harrowing testament to the brutality and inhumanity of the Holocaust. The stories of the women who suffered and died there must never be forgotten and should remind us of the importance of protecting human rights and preventing similar atrocities. Number 7. Valley State Prison, United States. Valley State Prison for Women, located in Acatitla, California, was once the largest women's prison in the United States before it was converted into a male facility in 2013. During its time as a women's prison, it gained notoriety for its dangerous conditions, abusive treatment of inmates, and a series of scandals that led to its eventual conversion. The stories of the women incarcerated at Valley State Prison serve as a grim reminder of the need for prison reform and the protection of human rights in the U.S. penal system. Overcrowding was a major issue at Valley State Prison, with inmates often forced to live in cramped and unsanitary conditions. The lack of adequate hygiene facilities and the prevalence of insects and rodents contributed to the spread of diseases and infections among the inmate population. Additionally, inadequate access to nutritious food and clean water led to malnutrition and other health problems among the inmates. Inmates at Valley State Prison suffered physical and psychological mistreatment from guards and fellow inmates. There were incidents of sexual assaults and harassment, and the prison administration failed to address these incidents. The hostile environment caused anxiety, depression, and self-harm. Medical care was deficient, and many inmates suffered from untreated illnesses and injuries. Pregnant women and those with chronic illnesses were particularly vulnerable. Scandals of abuse and mistreatment led to the closure of Valley State Prison for Women in 2011 when it was revealed that inmates were being illegally sterilized without consent. The prison was converted into a male facility in 2013, and the female inmates were transferred. Valley State Prison highlights the need for prison reform and the protection of the human rights of all inmates. Number 8. Madan Women's Prison, Indonesia. Madan Women's Prison, located in East Java, Indonesia, is notoriously known for its inhumane conditions, mistreatment of inmates, and the prevalence of violence within its walls. Its reputation for danger and abuse has earned it a place among the most dangerous women's prisons in the world. The stories of the women incarcerated in Madan serve as a sobering reminder of the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of human rights. Overcrowding is a major issue in Madan Women's Prison, with the facility housing far more inmates than its intended capacity. Inmates are forced to live in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, with inadequate ventilation and sanitary facilities. The lack of proper hygiene contributes to the spread of diseases and infestations, endangering the health of the women held there. Violence is common in the prison, with physical and psychological abuse directed at inmates. This includes sexual assaults and harassment, causing trauma and fear. The prison administration does not address these issues, perpetuating the cycle of violence and abuse. Medical care in the prison is insufficient, putting inmates' physical and mental health at risk. Corruption is common in the prison system, where inmates must pay bribes to obtain food and medicine. Disciplinary measures such as isolation and physical punishment negatively impact the mental health of inmates, causing feelings of despair and anxiety. Madan Women's Prison is an alarming example of the deplorable conditions and abuses faced by inmates in some parts of the world. The stories of these inmates underscore the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of human rights for all prisoners, regardless of gender. Number 9. Gani Prison, Georgia. Gani Prison, located in Tbilisi, Georgia, is a high-security institution notoriously known for its brutal treatment of inmates, both male and female. Although not exclusively a women's prison, the experiences of the women incarcerated in Gani justify its inclusion on this list of the most dangerous women's prisons. The harrowing stories of the inmates at Gani prison highlight the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of human rights. Overcrowding is a major issue in Gani prison, where inmates are often forced to live in cramped and unsanitary conditions. The lack of adequate hygiene facilities and poor ventilation contribute to the spread of diseases and infections among the inmate population. Additionally, insufficient access to nutritious food and clean water leads to malnutrition and other health problems for the inmates. Violence and abuse are rampant in Gani prison, with inmates frequently suffering physical and psychological mistreatment from both guards and fellow prisoners. Female inmates endure sexual assaults and harassment, resulting in trauma and fear. The lack of adequate medical care in Gani prison leads to untreated illnesses and injuries. Corruption is entrenched in the prison system, forcing inmates to pay bribes for basic necessities. Harsh disciplinary measures and poor conditions worsen the mental health of inmates, causing feelings of despair and depression. Gani prison is an example of the terrible conditions faced by female inmates in certain parts of the world. The stories of women incarcerated within its walls highlight the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of human rights for all inmates, regardless of gender. Number 10. Neve Tirza Prison, Israel. Neve Tirza Prison, located in Ramla, Israel, is the country's only women's prison and is notorious for its inhumane living conditions, overcrowding, and reports of mistreatment. Its reputation for danger and abuse has earned it a place among the most dangerous women's prisons in the world. The stories of women incarcerated in Neve Tirza Prison serve as a sobering reminder of the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of human rights. Overcrowding is a significant issue at Neve Tirza Prison, where the facility houses far more inmates than its intended capacity. Inmates are forced to live in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, with inadequate ventilation and sanitary facilities. The lack of proper hygiene contributes to the spread of diseases and infestations, endangering the health of the women held there. Violence is prevalent within the prison, with female inmates frequently subjected to physical and psychological mistreatment from both guards and fellow inmates. Women in the prison endure sexual assaults and harassment, causing lasting trauma and fear. The prison administration inadequately addresses these issues, perpetuating the cycle of violence and abuse. Medical care at Neve Tirza Prison is inadequate, risking the physical and mental health of the inmates. Corruption within the prison system worsens living conditions and undermines trust in the administration. Harsh disciplinary measures negatively impact the mental health of inmates, leading to feelings of despair, depression, and anxiety. Neve Tirza Prison exemplifies the deplorable conditions and abuses faced by female inmates in some parts of the world, underscoring the need for reforms and the protection of human rights for all inmates, regardless of gender. Thank you for watching the complete video. I'm leaving one on screen that will leave you amazed. Click right now.